but it's also a very hard place to think openly and freely.
Yes.
Tell us about what it's like in 2025, you think, in the West, and if the West is still a term that we can use, because in some ways it seems as if it's disintegrating in front of our very eyes.
Well, maybe, that's the big question. I mean, in some ways, of course, it is similar things are going on all over the West. On the other hand, I think there is still a considerable distinction between the United States and Europe, and Protestant Europe and Catholic Europe, and that a lot of in my view, a lot of the illiberal and dogmatic thinking among so-called progressives in the West, but in America especially, is a kind of a quasi. It's the air of Protestant Puritanism. It's a quasi-religious form of dogmatism where people are tested on the purity of their faith, on the language they use, and so on. This seems to have had less effect in traditionally Catholic countries, whether people go to church or not. And it's because the purity of one's... You're not asked in a Catholic country to testify to the purity of your faith in public all the time. I mean, and if you've sinned, you go to your confessor. And whereas Protestants have to confess their sins in public and so on. So I think that it is a quasi-religious thing, the intolerant and illiberal atmosphere in progressive institutions like universities, publishers, foundations, and so on. And at the same time, and it's not for nothing that this is so strong in America, because America is still, many Americans still have a very religious way of approaching reality, more so than in Europe. On the other hand, I think that the people who are now in power are more dangerous because they have the power of the state behind them, are mimicking this in many ways, and are just as illiberal and just as intolerant and just as dogmatic on different grounds, but the way of thinking is very similar. And so if you're a free-thinking person who invites argument, who wants to think from different perspectives, who wants to provoke and so on, you're being squeezed from both sides.
Tell me about it.
And Spinoza, well, how would he react? Well, one thing, I mean, this is, again, something I've been criticized for, but I stick by it. Take the issue of trans.
Okay, well, you're going to go there.
I think...
My listeners tell me to shut up about it, but you go ahead.
I will. I mean, why is trans... Has it become such a litmus test in the progressive world, even though it's only a tiny minority of people who actually want to change their gender? And my own view, and I think Spinoza's view, would be that one has to respect the feelings of somebody who wants to change their gender. Fine, let them do it. There's no reason to despise them. If they want to be called she or he or they, no problem. But don't confuse it with biological gender. Don't say, people who can get pregnant or something when you mean a woman. And so it's a bit like the theological, dogmatic way to truth and the philosophical or scientific way to truth, that there is room for both, but don't get them muddled up. I think
it seems impossible for people to say the following, which seems to me the sanest thing to say, which is, I completely respect someone who has transitioned to become present as a member of the opposite sex. I will refer to that person with the pronouns and the respect they deserve as a citizen. I think there should be some procedure whereby they can be recognized as such, so that not everybody can just decide one day or the next. At the same time, we can say they are not in every single respect the opposite sex to which they biologically are. Not in every single respect. That's all we're saying. That's all the honestly real, the reality.
That seems to me impeccably reasonable.
Well, again, yes, it is not. That is not allowed. You either have Trump saying this is an act of dishonesty, that these people are being. He said this about the members of the military, that somehow they're being openly trans, which is actually honest about themselves, is somehow a form of deceit, which is just a disgusting thing to say, a disrespectful and horrible thing to say about trans people. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you have people telling me that a woman has a penis. Yes. And I want to say no.